is a little bit of a myth that's been perpetrated. But the latke, as I say, is just a sad second place to what we've come to believe is the foremost of the Jewish foods. This is the essence of what comes out of our Jewish tradition. And of course, it comes from Haman, Mr. Anti-Purim himself. What type of religious institution? What's going on?
You were reformed.
We are so reformed. I'm going to get to that in a second. But
What was your thought?
no, I'm going to tell you. We're going to break from the religious background and talk a little bit about the Chumash in the American jurisprudence system. Because to some of you, before I became a candidate to be the religious leader of this community, I decided that I was practicing law. That's not unusual for religious leaders in this community. But the interesting thing is that I found out that we are so reformed that
How reformed are we?
that I can waive in. I can waive in, and I don't have to sit for the exam. So I don't have to take it. It's terrific. Dad doesn't have to spend any more money in tuition. He'll be pleased to know that. But anyway, there are a couple of cases that are definitely related to the Chumash. And one is the famous case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which is Justice Harlan's opinion. And that enunciated the theory that you could have separate but equal. And that, of course, is a Chumash. Separate but equal. Fruit and fiber. Latkes, bland. One. Doesn't fall into Plessy versus Ferguson. The other thing, of course, is that in American tort law, that's tort law, we're not talking tarts, we're talking torts. And we're talking tort to try to figure out who did what to whom. And this is an interesting thing to note. When a latke is bad, who do you blame? I mean, it's just potatoes being fried. You can't establish liability for a bad latke. However, when it comes to a Chumash, you can because everybody, tonight, everybody's going to walk around after this debate, and they're going to say, who made these Chumash? Because they're either great or bad. Because they also made these Chumash. So there's liability. It falls clearly on the Chumash. It's much more deeply embedded in our American legal system. The other thing, of course, is that we're talking to health again. My Dr. Fred is going to talk about the healthy potato latke. But environmentally, the potato latke is linked to some very bad situations. First of all, it's cooked in oil. And a lot of people haven't forgotten the Exxon Valdez. And if they forgot about that, they certainly until yesterday didn't forgive BP for what happened in the Gulf. And of course, we're still worried about all those tankers from North Dakota that are crossing the northern part of the country and derailing. Oil is a problem. And you got to take the oil out of it, you got no latkes. So it's not good for the environment. The other interesting thing in our analysis of the potato latke versus the Chumash is the fact that a Chumash is like a piece of real estate. And, when we do real estate, we have covenants that run with the land. You have easements and all those good things. They're separate entities. The Chumash has those separate entities. So much like the classic common law of real estate, the Chumintashen relates to our jurisprudence, whereas the Latka just doesn't cut it. So the interesting thing, of course, about the Chumintashen is that it also is related to the American criminal system. Because the Chumintashen were sometimes referred to as Haman's ears, sometimes Haman's pockets, sometimes Haman's ears. And the reason it was Haman's ears is because he was evil, and he was hung. And there was a tradition in hanging people, criminals, that you would cut their ears off before you execute them. So clearly, the Chumintashen stands for the wonderful hanging of Haman, who was not a good guy. And any of you, I recommend The Guillotine. It's great. It's a quick read.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, somebody may even read it to you. But it's a quick read. And the other thing about the Chumintashen, it is so identified with this holiday of Purim. And of course, Purim is noted for the Queen Esther. I mean, Queen Esther, the first, before there was Gloria Steinem, before there was Bella Abzug, there was Queen Esther. I mean, she was clearly the first women's liberation person recognized in our liturgy, in our writings. So, Queen Esther, the story of a young beauty queen who rises above her station and marries a king, kind of reminds me of my wife, Lacey. A young beauty. So, if there's no other reason for you to eat Chumintashen, it's because of Lacey. And she bakes a mean Chumintashen because for preparation for this debate this evening, she actually gave me her mother's Chumintashen recipe. So those of you who think that this is not boring enough as it is, I read it, and you could really fall asleep. But that's the story. No, there's one other thing. There's one other thing. I started talking about the triangle. We talked about the Holy Spirit and all the other places. But in international signals, if you travel throughout the world, you will find that the triangle stands for many different things. It's a sign of a woman if it's in one direction, or a man if it's in another direction. It's a sign of mountains and caves. It's a sign of air, earth, fire, and water. They're each triangles depending where you put the line on the bottom. And of course, the ultimate is the triangle of the double triangles, which are a sign of unity. It have to be the Star of David. So, without a doubt, make no mistake that the Chumintashen is the watershed piece of Jewish food. And I can't recommend Chumintashen to you more than I've tried to tonight. It is for you. Thank you.
Now back to our program. We're going to hear now on behalf of the Dr. Jonathan Alexander, renowned cardiologist. You know, I confess to tell all of you that years ago I visited Dr. Alexander. I went to see him, and I said, Dr. Alexander, I'm experiencing chest pain in 2 places. He said, well, stop going to those places. Anyway, Dr. Alexander is always trying to help people. And remember that Oneg Shabbat I told you about it? That same Oneg Shabbat, he went up to someone who will, for obvious reasons, remain nameless, and he said, Mrs. Blank, I don't like the look of your husband. And she said, I don't either, but he's good to the kids. Anyway, Da-da-da-da-da-da. Without further ado, Jonathan Alexander, noted cardiologist, will speak on behalf of the Latka.
Thank you, Rabbi. I come here tonight not as Jonathan Alexander, but as Chef Alexander. Because at the end of the day, my esteemed colleague and friend, Neil Marcus, we can talk about triangulation this, we can talk about symbolism that. The reality is, how do you feel after eating a latte versus how do you feel after eating a Purimkah? And I will convince you, without a doubt, at the end of my presentation, that you will feel better after eating a latte. We can talk about health issues, but this is Chef Alexander talking. There it is. Now, how can you look at that and not feel good? Right? But sour cream here, it's tastier, it's more appealing. I will convince you of this. So, I'm going to do a historical perspective. The latte was criticized as a recent phenomenon, and I will convince you that historically it goes way back and predates the Purimkah. We will go into the different versions. He mentioned the Irish potato. Well, there are quite a few other interpretations of the latte. We'll talk about the Hanukkah tradition and the symbolism in Judaism. We'll talk about the preparation, culinary science. What's a nice cardiologist like you doing defending the latte, fried in oil, and the survey says. And then a little surprise at the end. No matter what your origin, you will find a potato latte as part of the culinary tradition of every country in Europe and the Middle East. This is beyond Ireland. In Austria, the Tockelkuchen. All of you know about the Tockelkuchen. It's the national dish in Belarus. In Czech, German, the Ledubucha, the Tuscany. Even in Iran, potato pancakes are part of the tradition. In Yiddish, latte is a Yiddish word, but also leviva or plural levivot. Rabbi, did you know that?
Yes.
Back to the education here.
Thank you.
I hope it appears in the next sermon. Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Polish, of course, Russian.
John, I'm sorry, how do you
Frankie.
pronounce the one from Luxembourg?
How do you pronounce it? Better keep it up. And then, of course, Slovakia, the Nefliti. So you can have it. Remember, we're talking about the culinary aspects, not triangulation, not the legal implications. That's boring. We're talking about how it should be. A salty side dish. We can sweeten it. It was criticized as just being a potato, but we can sweeten it with applesauce, blueberry sugar, and cinnamon. My research revealed that in northeast England, the tate fish, not a lot of synagogues out there, but still, it resembles a deep-fried piece of fish. In Sweden, the ragmok, crispy donut pan served with lingonberry jam. Use of onions and carrots. My esteemed colleagues did not talk about the health benefits. And we know about the context. How can you deny the oil lasting? How can you not feel good when you eat the oil? Maybe vegetable oil. In the latte, the second temple. How could you feel great? You want to eat something that reminds you of human? I don't think so. Leviva, the Hebrew name for latte, has its origins, as Rabbi knows, in the book of Samuel's description of the story of Amnon and Tamar. Am I right?
Please continue.
You will find my research really